Personal opinions, politics, and militancy. The difference between the passivity of the freedom to reinforce and the intentionality of the freedom to overcome. Intentionality, like passivity, is the product of setting limits. In the context of politics, limits have the potential to become sharp tools, used to develop and practice militancy. Limits form shared political opinions and organize people around a common strategy. By coordinating limits with others, individuals can go beyond the moralizing of subjective judgments or idealized possibilities in order to practice politics tethered to reality and ethics in meaningful and revolutionary ways. It's due to our unfinishedness as human beings that we're always able to form personal opinions, even in oppressive circumstances. Good material conditions do not create personal opinions because opinions can also be formed under bad material conditions. The faculty to react personally to the world is not dependent on external precepts. It does not need anyone else's participation. History does not need to progress to a particular point before I can have a subjective perspective. A personal opinion requires no theory, no awareness of itself, no additional effort. It simply is. You can incorporate more effort or theory into your individual analysis, but this is not how political opinions are formed. Political idealism exploits the confusion between these two types of opinions. It attempts to pass off a personal opinion for a political one. But political opinions are not the result of individuals forming educated, personal opinions about politics. Political discourse is encumbered by political opinions. These opinions use the rhetoric of and present themselves as political engagement, but they're not shaped by political limits, which exist independently of one's beliefs. Personal opinions are not necessarily bound by anything concrete. They're simply a choice. In a political debate, if somebody is defending a personal opinion against a political opinion, this is not a matter of disagreement, but a difference of limits. Some limits are as foundational to our existence as the ever-presence of our personal opinions. For example, we exist in a material world. All of us, everyone, together. This is a limit. Opinions are evaluations of things in this world, understood through some kind of judgmental framing. This is also a limit. If the explicit limits of this framing align with the material reality of the actual political situation, the one that's out there in the world and includes other people, then my opinions could be considered political opinions. But if the limits are defined only by personal methods, or worse, not defined at all, these opinions cannot be political, regardless of their content. To decline the responsibility of intimately learning a specific theoretical framework for political analysis is to remain in the realm of idealism and personal opinions. Political opinions must take other people into account. This requires a clear understanding of the current material conditions of people, combined with a theory for interpreting the objects and situations of the world. These theoretical limits are necessary so that the material situation is not interpreted through the ideology of the dominant class. Without awareness of the dialectic between the limits of the world and the freedom of our personal opinions, without knowing that this dialectic takes place in the world, there could be no self-awareness and no critique. There could also be no criticism of the system and, in effect, no revolutionary positions. This means that personal opinions have no potential or possibility of being revolutionary in a political sense, because the limits of the status quo are not being intentionally replaced with the limits of a revolutionary theory. The material limits and the presence of others are uncompromising factors of our world. But in order to develop political opinions, our freedom must place intentional limits on itself. These methodological limits are fundamental to the distinction of political opinions, because if freedom is a fact of our existence, unfettered freedom is not a political theory of action, but an aesthetic fetish which must be rejected as inept personal opinion. This is the difference between the passivity of the freedom to reinforce and the intentionality of the freedom to overcome. Because they are situated in the world, negating an individualist framework, and because they are informed by explicit theory that can be learned and applied by others, political opinions can be shared. Setting limits in common with other people increases the power of political opinions. Still, this commonality does not in itself determine action on the individual level. Coordination is not a direct result of organizing and solidarity. The practice of politics is determined by strategy, not opinion. Strategy is the how. How do we insert ourselves in the situation? How do we go from awareness and theory, from opinion and camaraderie, to effective action? How do we act in a coordinated way to strengthen the effects of our action? How can my freedom be an agent for change in the world and not an egoist retreat? An absence of strategy is another opportunity for political opinions to revert to the realm of the personal. The vacuum created by not knowing what to actually do will inevitably be filled by personal conjecture and dominant ideology. Maintaining political opinions in common is not a sufficient limit to prevent the personal opinions of individuals from blurring the lines between ideals and reality. Shared ideas and analysis are not enough to focus the freedom of these individuals, and this lack of coordinated focus disperses precise political opinions carelessly in all directions. Strategy is an anchor to the material presence of our politics. It serves to remind us that things are not isolated. This is not the only moment in history. There are others. I'm not the only one working with this strategy. There are others. Coordinated limits on strategy are crucial for defending political action from self-sabotage. These limits make strategy a tool and not a trend. Like opinions, a strategy is not political if it does not involve working with others. And this work must be based on a common understanding of an explicit situation. By materially situating and intentionally limiting our opinions and our strategy, we enable the formation of new perspectives and plans of action that can be realized dialogically through sharing and coordinating with others. Militancy is not about being a soldier, but it does involve discipline. It's the aspect of coordinating with others that perpetually remains the responsibility of each individual. Militancy is the actualized power of political opinions. It is evidence of the fundamental dependence on individual people for political change. This means doing the tasks and the work related to the strategy of a political group. But it also means maintaining the limits on oneself that prevent one's freedom from being a passive pawn of the status quo. Political opinions, strategy, and action all depend on the freedom of individuals. So if the lines between the personal and the political are not maintained on the individual level, coordinated politics will be polluted with idealistic dreams. This threat must be recognized when it creeps into political discourse, both inter- and intrapersonally, because intentional limits are the best tools for defending our politics from ourselves. Since personal opinions are an ever-present feature of our world, changing that world politically depends on the discipline of militants not to rely on personal opinion for political action.